What's going on, everybody? My name is Nick.
And my name is Dave.
And we are putting a bow on the Riptide series today. We're talking about the sermon, A Rescue, and it's a good one.
Yeah, it's I've enjoyed this series, but all throughout it, I've been looking forward to this, the culmination, the good news. And,
Ready to be done.
Ready to be done, ready to tell the good part of the story.
Yeah.
The good part of the story. So, it's good. Let's get into it.
Let's get into it. So, Dave, how was your weekend? Did you have anything fun this week?
My weekend was very relaxing. My mother-in-law was coming up on her 91st birthday.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that incredible?
That is
91st
awesome.
birthday. She does pretty good for 91. You got to admit.
She really does.
Really pretty spry.
I'm honest. I love watching her on Sunday mornings. She is the most joyful person in the room.
She is.
Just clapping along with the songs and just...
You would never know she was 91.
No,
but
really
anyway, we
wouldn't.
went up to my brother-in-law who lives on Lake Hartwell to celebrate her birthday. And it was a great day. Got to hang out in the lake a little bit. Got to grill out and eat some burgers. And so
nice.
it was a good day. We had a good Sunday yesterday and worship. And how was your weekend? The last weekend of the summer.
Yeah, my weekend was good. Just had some family come over. We had a pretty pivotal point in our family's life. Our oldest, Olivia, got her first cell phone as she's going into middle school.
Yeah.
So now we have to learn how to manage that with her, help her, make her realize that it's not the end all be all.
You have no idea, my friend, what lies before you in the joys of parenting.
That is
a teenager.
Oh, so for a sermon about hope might be a good one to come up because we might need it. It sounds like
it's always
a little ominous.
It's always a joy. But as I said, the last weekend of the summer, it's not really the last weekend of summer. We're still in summer.
Yeah, it's still hot.
You're in the countdown to school starting.
That's right.
A week from Monday.
Yeah, a week from when we're filming it today.
Yeah.
At this time next week, they'll be in school, and
it's hard to believe.
This summer just flew by. Mm-hmm. I feel like I got to vacation. I blinked. I was like, oh my gosh, we have 2 weeks to go. Mm-hmm. But, we're here to talk about the series. Let's wrap up putting the bow on this series of Riptide and the sermon's Rescue, right? So why don't you kind of break it down for us?
Well, I've been looking forward to doing this one. We've sort of walked through actually the story of David and Bathsheba, but we've been using this metaphor of riptide or rip currents, because most people know what they are. And this is the season, not only the end of the summer, we have school starting back, but we also have Shark Week. So there's a lot of stuff in the news. One of my favorite weeks
of the year.
But and just, I know for a lot of folks this is a review, but just to say where we are with this series, Riptide, it's a series about this phenomenon that happens where we get caught in a rip current, and we may be out playing in the surf, and you're not really paying attention, and it's gentle in a way, and it pulls you out further and further until suddenly you can't touch bottom anymore. And you're over your head, and it's pulling you out to sea. And that really kind of speaks in a way to how we are with some bad decisions that we can make in our life, where we might make a little bad decision that's not really, doesn't seem like that big a deal, but then that leads to another one, that leads to another one, that leads to another one, a little lie, a large lie, a really big lie. Yeah. And suddenly we are over our head and in need of rescue. Yeah. And so that's kind of what we looked at over the last couple of weeks of warning signs around that, about how to kind of what to do when we find ourselves in it. But as we've been looking at the scripture portion of it, is to watch the life of David. Yeah. David, from David and Goliath fame, David who was the most beloved king in all Israel, one of the heroes of the faith, a man which repeatedly in scripture it says he was a man after God's own heart. Yeah. A man that if you want to really look at what it means to follow God, you look at David, but even David got himself caught in a rip current by a series of one bad decision after another, and it just ended up escalating to the point where this woman who he had sort of fallen lust with and got her pregnant, and to try to cover up things that ended up with the murder, which is the best way of saying it. He, as king, could make the orders to put this guy on the front line, and he does, and he's killed. And so he gets to the end of it, and, all this is over. And I'm sure David must have breathed this huge sigh of relief. All right. Okay. That was
under control.
That was bad.
Yeah.
That was bad. That was awful. I feel terrible about it, but no one knows, and it's over. But it's not over.
Yeah.
Because God's not pleased with David, and he's going to send the prophet Nathan to talk to him. And so I know you know the story, but it is an interesting approach that Nathan takes to talking to David about this huge thing he's done, right?
Yeah.
What Nathan does is he comes in and he tells David a story. He gives him an illustration.
Right.
And he tells a story of this really rich landowner who had like flocks and flocks of sheep. And then this one poor landowner who only had this one little sheep. And he tells the story in this way. It was like the man used to like cuddle the sheep in his hands, and he would feed him, at the table out of his hand and stuff. And he loved the sheep. Well, the rich man had a friend coming in from out of town. And so rather than take one of his sheep, he went and had the little lamb, who was the only lamb and the beloved little lamb of the poor man's sheep. He took him, and David just flips out. He is so angry about this story, and he says, that man showed no compassion. He needs to pay him back 7 times over. And then Nathan says, what? This is
it's you.
It's you. You are the man.
Yep.
And then David sort of at that moment realizes it's not over.
Yeah.
God knows, Nathan knows. And so he actually have a choice at that time. He could continue to flail in the water.
Could have killed Nathan.
He could have Nathan killed. He had all the power.
Yeah.
But David, and I think that's where it's a great example for him, for us, from him, is that he says, no more. I can't do this. I need help.
Yeah.
And so he confesses that he has sinned. And the scripture tells us that right after that, he gets the word that God says he is forgiven. And so it just, it's a beautiful story of redemption, and we can talk through some more parts of it. But, what do you think about that story? How does that strike you? I mean, I know you've heard it before. How have you heard it? And,
I've heard it, and I've always thought about how Nathan kind of approaches it is such a genius way, because maybe it'll make him think, and I think I'd be intimidated to go up to this is the most powerful man in the world. I think you said all of a sudden, this is probably the most powerful man in the whole world. And you're supposed to be giving him the message of hey, you kind of messed up here, dude. Yeah. So I was like, a story's a brilliant way, because then he has to think about it for a minute. At that point, you could just bolt, get out before it's too late. But he doesn't. Obviously, he explains it.
Right. Is there sort of a strategy in that as we're, last week we talked some about how do you talk to someone who is caught in a riptide? How do you help rescue them? If they haven't hit rock bottom yet, how can we approach it in a way that doesn't send them more into a defensive posture and back them further up into a corner? And I think what Nathan does is genius, and that he gets him aboard on a story, and he's able to use this to help him see that it's him.
Yeah, I mean, because if he would have just come in and said hey, you're really messing up here, dude. We know what you've done. And immediately David's going to go on the defense,
right.
He's going to figure out the way that he can silence Nathan. He's going to try to clean it up, as opposed to hearing the story and then be like, yeah, that's messed up. Why would he do that? And then realize, oh crap, this is me.
I've done the same and even worse. I do think it was genius, but I do think, what I don't think should be lost on us is this need that we have when we find ourselves in a riptide for confession.
Yeah.
To get to that point where we say, I'm not trying to save myself anymore. I'm not trying to cover it up anymore. I hate living like this. I hate feeling like this, and it needs to end, and I can't do it alone. I need help.
Yeah.
And that's where David finds himself, I think.
I think confession is such a hard word, because I think, I've talked to numerous people who would ask me the question back when I would talk about confession, and they would say, why do I need to confess if God already knows? And I simply just kind of look back and I say, confession's more for you than it is for God, because there has to be that point where you understand that you've messed up, because until that point, you're not going to turn from it. Like it's your act of actually putting it down, saying enough's enough, and saying, I'm done living in this way. I'm done living in this method. I'm going to make a change.
Yeah.
Like,
it's kind of like say the name.
Yeah.
Say the name. I've done some marches, particularly back a couple of summers ago. And a big part of sort of the chants would be say their name, because in saying the name, it understand the humanity, the impact, the blame, the guilt, all of that comes in with a confession. And I think that's part of.
It takes it from a general issue to a personal issue.
Right. It's not just like this thing is out there. This is a specific thing that happened. So I think that's where, Nathan helped David get to that point of realizing that.
And I think the redemption part starts with, I'm trying to remember the statement you said yesterday, that the worst decision is not your last decision, or it doesn't define your life, or something like that.
The worst decision that we've made, it's the same thing about confession. The importance of confession is difficult, as hard as if you want to use the word negative as that can be.
Yeah.
But it's a negative that turns positive, because that's what God does. But we have to address it and confess it and not minimize it. It wasn't really a big deal, because that's what we do in the bargaining stage and the sort of time where we'll compare ourselves to other people. When we realize that this is our sin, I did it.
Yeah.
Then when we're able to do that and get to that point, then I think God is able to come in and build it back together. And it's an instantaneous thing. It's that sort of forgiveness, and He begins building right then. Not to mean that there's not going to be some consequences for what we did, but the grace starts right there. The forgiveness starts right there, and this understanding that my worst decision does not define my life right now.
Yeah.
I made a bad decision, but that's not going to define my life. What's going to define my life may very much be the restoration that happens after I made this bad decision, and how that can be a witness for other people to see, like, he did this thing, but yet that did not define him, and that, his life went on, and there were a lot of positive and great things that were accomplished. And I talked about David yesterday. David had consequences that happened. And if you read those next few chapters, 12, 13, 14, and 2 Samuel, you can see of them. But if you go back and look at the genealogy of Jesus, from David and Bathsheba, not the child died that she was pregnant with, but a child, she has another son, becomes the next king of Israel, and becomes the great, I forget how many greats, but becomes in that line that leads to Jesus, who for the world ultimately does what God does for David in the forgiveness and the restoration that happens after he confessed and understood what happened.
It's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool.
I think this idea of restoration, though, it's hard to understand the fullness of the grace we can receive when we ask to be forgiven, when we confess and stuff like that, because it's not something that we are really trained to do ourselves. Even when we say we forgive you, it's more of like I forgive you, but it should never happen again. Right. Or, like, this is it. I think I read somewhere, and maybe better than me, but grace is actually just the closest root word that they could pull from the original translation, or from the original text, that defines close to what grace actually is. That it's so much of this that we don't we haven't earned this part, and I think that's the hard thing to accept about grace, is that we do nothing for it except ask, and it's given to us. There's a
great book by Max Lucado. I almost used it. There just wasn't time. If I had one more week in this series, I would have probably brought it in. But in this book, it's called A Grip of Grace. I highly recommend it. But in this book, it actually starts off with this parable that he calls the river. And in this parable, there are these brothers that are living in paradise. I'm not going to tell the whole thing, but I'll get to the point where I don't think it applies here. So these four brothers, and they're living sort of in this paradise up in a mountain somewhere. And there's one place they're not supposed to go, and it's close to the river because the river is dangerous. It has this, very fast moving stream.
Yeah.
And, three of the brothers, they're just very, very curious, and they're going down there all the time. And then one day they all fall in, and it takes them way down the mountain, way down through all these streams, way down, and dumps them off. So far, they have no idea where they are or how they're going to get back. And so for the first few days, they just kind of sit there and, kind of look at each other and like, we've really messed up. And so the first son actually kind of looks around. He sees the people that are living there, the sort of the pagans that are out there. And he says, all right, so I guess I have to make the best of what I'm going to do. So I'm going to go live with them. And so he does that. And so then the second son said, well, at some point, our father is going to want to know the sins of this one who has gone off and completely deserted him and started living this other way. And so he goes off to sort of follow him and take notes on all the bad stuff that he's doing. But the third one, that's the one that I want to get to because I think that's the one that I identify most with. And I think a lot of Christians with this idea of confession and accepting of grace struggle with. The third one says, I've got to make my way back home. I've got to journey back up this river, even though it's impossible. It's, miles and miles and miles. And so he starts gathering these, stream is flowing in an incredible amount of speed. And so he has to roll these tremendous rocks in one at a time and make his way up like one little rock at a time, building back to get back upstream. It's impossible. He'll never be able to make it. And so the fourth brother, who was a good son, stayed up there. He's sort of the Jesus character. He finally comes down to get them. The first one has forgotten who he was. The second one says, well, I could go back, but I really need to be making an account of what my brother's doing here. And the third one won't go back with him because he says, no, I don't deserve it. I've got to earn it back. Father's going to be so displeased with me if I don't build it back up myself. He'll never take me back in. He'll never forgive him. And so he's completely missed the forgiveness that it takes to take that sort of separation that we have from the life that God really wants us to have, and the life that we sometimes mess up and fall away from. God wants to restore that even in the mess, just like he did with David and Bathsheba. He somehow or another in that terrible mess brought it out for redemption and hope. And I just think it's a beautiful part of the story, but on a human level, so hard for us. We use words like penance and, I don't know what else that, it's not that, and I think I said this on the sermon. It's not that he was forgiven when he finally made it back to shore. Yeah. He was forgiven the minute he put his hand up and said, I need rescue. God is there to meet him where he was. So
there's a video out there. Like if you're a visual person, there's a skit out there. And I don't know if I talked about this on the podcast before. It's possible. So if I'm repeating myself, I apologize, but it's just too good to not drop in here. And it's the skit is called, it's based on the song Lifehouse Everything. Just go to YouTube and type in Lifehouse Everything skit. Mm-hmm. And the premise of this skit is that this girl starts off by getting to know Jesus. Like there's kind of this part of this creation where it's like, hey, let me show you what rain is like. Let me show you what apple. And they're dancing along and it's cool. But then like things start coming in between God and this girl in the skit. And, one of them's like relationships. One of it's like money, looking pretty, drugs. And then it kind of just, and the visual is that she's getting further and further and further away from God. And then it comes to the climax of the song, the Satan character, the one who's kind of driving her, pulling her further and further away. Is trying to convince her that it's all, you're done here. You know what I mean? Like you should kill yourself, blah, 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 Mm-hmm. And then there's this moment in the song that she throws down whatever it was that she had in her hand and just starts sprinting back towards Jesus. Mm-hmm. And the battle, like we've kind of been talking about, like, there's repercussions. There's going to be a little work to get fully back that you're going to have to kind of work through and process through and all that stuff. But like, It's just like, it's ferocious. I mean, they're picking her up, they're throwing her back. And then there's a spot where Jesus jumps in like around midway, and just stands over her, puts his arms over it, and these things that had been getting to her can no longer reach her. Yeah. So they're fighting. And then of course there's another part, Jesus throws his arms up, so they fall down. And then that relationship's kind of back to that spot. And I feel like it just relates to this idea of riptide so well, because it's just that small thing. You don't realize how far, these little decisions might start taking you until you get to a point. And now they're not all going to end with this life or death situation necessarily. Some of them we catch much earlier. Some of them aren't as extreme. We've used alcoholism. I think we've used drugs and stuff like that a few times.
Yeah.
Gambling. And realistically, not a lot of us hit that hardcore level. I mean, this can be simple as one little lie being covered up by another little lie. You know what I mean? Like to a point where you realize like, oh man, I have lied to a lot of people and I can't even keep my story straight,
Yeah.
But there's still that battle of turning and working your way back towards God. But God met them there, takes out the things, and is like, let's work together now, And I just love it. It's so beautiful. I think every time I see it is like,
yeah, I want to see it. I think, it maybe part of the issue is like to continue to work this metaphor.
Yeah.
Is that like, if you get to the point and you can imagine, and we could compare it to other things. I know a couple of times when I've been like, I fell, like I'm in a place where like suddenly you realize you've lost your balance and you've fallen. And it's pretty scary what happens to you and inside your heart when you like, wow, I'm in real danger here. But like, I can only imagine, it's never happened to me, but like if you got to the point where you're in the surf, and as turbulent as it might be, you can always touch bottom. Mm-hmm. You don't know what bottom was, but suddenly when you realize you can't touch bottoms anymore and you can't fight against the waves, and then you need rescue.
Yeah.
I mean, so there's that part, but there's also this part of like barely being in control where you can touch bottom a little bit, but you're still not experiencing the life that God really intends for us to have. Mm-hmm. And I really think that's one of the most dangerous places, where we still feel like we've got some sort of control, but yet to look at it in the big scheme of things, and particularly look over the course of our life, it's like we are not thriving at all.
Yeah.
We are not living life in its fullness at all. We are just barely hanging on.
Yeah.
And, to get to the points, I think sometimes it takes to get to the point where you can't touch bottom. Mm-hmm. I guess part of my reason for doing this message series was to sort of get a self-awareness before it gets to that point where you could possibly, it could be much, much worse.
Yeah. Stay in the shallow end, folks.
Stay in the, don't stay in the shallow end.
Well, I'm just saying of the ocean. It's not as dangerous there.
Yeah. I heard a guy say one time, this has nothing to do with it, it's just a funny joke. A guy said at one time, in fact, it's a retirement speak at a conference. He says, a mentor told me one time that the church is a lot like the public swimming pool.
Oh,
all the noise is coming from the shallow end. So that's pretty funny. Don't stay in the shallow end at that point. But yeah, I mean, it is, you need to stay under control. You need to have self-awareness. You can play out and swim and have all sorts of fun in the surf, to continue to use that metaphor.
I agree.
But be aware of the dangers that are out there.
Yeah.
Be able to read the warning signs and not allow ourselves to be swept into these places where we are out of control.
For sure.
Yeah.
But we are getting close to time, but I cannot, in good conscience, not have us talk about a picture you showed yesterday, because it was, you brought it with you. That's cool.
This picture, I think Courtney and Frankie are going to put it up for people to see.
Yeah,
and
it was such a cool visual of just what the church can do.
Yeah.
Because it's everybody kind of linking arms or holding hands to kind of reach this. Is it a person out on the surf? Is that what it is?
I tell you what happened. I was putting, every week I put together a sermon bumper.
Right.
And so I basically go on, this is kind of stuff that you can't find in stock videos.
Right.
So I go on YouTube and I just put in there Riptide Rescues. And this is one of the first ones that came up. And it just was such a picture to me of the church, of people forming this human chain to go out and rescue someone who's caught out there in a riptide.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, man, if there ever was an image to me of what the church should be about, that's it.
Yeah.
People, locking arms and reaching out to get the person that's in danger. Yeah.
It's a beautiful visual. It's a beautiful metaphor. And I think it's a reminder to us as the body of Christ is that like we're called to be people of movement and action as well. Mm-hmm. It's real easy to just be like, oh man, there's somebody out there, sucks for them. Like it's real easy to ignore kind of the struggles of the people around us, but God didn't call us to be in a relationship like that. Mm-hmm. God called us to be in life together. And actually yesterday, another high point for me was the Stephen Minister video.
Right.
Or the Stephen Ministries video. Just hearing the stories of people who said, I need help. Wherever they were at, I think one was battling cancer. One had just hit a hard time in their life, and just to hear the stories of redemption coming through conversation, because we have people who were willing to step out into the surf a little and say, let me give you a hand.
Let me give you a hand.
It was so cool. And it's something that we should all feel a charge and a call to do, because we all know somebody, whether they're a part of the church or not a part of the church, we all know somebody who's out there that we know the lifesaver,
And what I like about this is just that it's a community of people. It's just not one lifeguard going. Right. It's the whole community coming around. Because I think sometimes we tend to think, well, it's
pastor's
preacher,
job.
It's the preacher's job or the youth pastor's job, or Stephen Minister's jobs, but it's the whole church.
Yeah,
in whatever way we can lend our hand and lock arms to rescue people.
Yeah.
So,
it's beautiful. Cool. Well, Dave, do you have a kind of, I guess, a teaser for the next, where we go? We got a one-off. We got another series coming.
What do you think of when you think of the word reset?
That I messed up my video game and I need to start over.
Right. Need a hard reset.
Yes.
So sometimes you can just restart the program, and sometimes you need to do a hard reset.
Okay.
That's pushing that thing, turning out the power, unplug, like the modem at home, you got to do a hard reset to get back online.
Yeah.
And so, that's the next metaphor I'm jumping on. We're doing a message series, as we are back to school, called Reset. We need to reset. We need to recalibrate. We need to reconnect. We need to reconnect with the Redeemer. So that's where we're going the next few weeks. And this Sunday is the fifth Sunday. It's a fifth Sunday, so one service,
10 o'clock.
10 o'clock.
Yep.
And so that's, those are always high days of worship, but it's going to be great. The blessing of the backpacks is this Sunday. So
yep. And that's
a fun time will be had by all.
That's true. Yeah. And if you haven't signed up yet, there's going to be a meal afterwards. So sign up on our website, hickoryflat.org.
Right.
It should be a great time. We'll all worship together. Everybody comes in the room together. We'll sing music together. We'll join in the spiritual act of worship.
Yeah, we're doing some sort of camp meeting kind
fun.
of songs, because it's that sort of time of year too.
Yeah,
so,
let's go.
So I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a great day in worship, and I'm looking forward to getting back into some sort of rhythm as we get into the school year, even though it seems like it's too early and too darn hot.
Yeah.
I am looking forward to refining the rhythm of the school year.
I'm not looking forward to having to wake up a little earlier to get the kids on the bus and all that stuff, but I am looking forward to getting back into kind of the new rhythms and stuff
routine.
Like that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome.
Well, guys, as always, we'd love to have you be a part of this. Any conversation, anything you got for us, we'd love to hear about it. You can drop it in the email at deepdive@hickoryflat.org. You can go online, drop it in any of the comment sections of the podcast when it's posted on Wednesday, or I guess as you're watching it now. But other than that, Dave, you got anything else to add?
I don't. I'm good.
All right. Well, you guys have a good week, and we'll see you next time.
All right. God bless.